guys are all spread out around Canada, like doing their own thing now, like separate from the band. And I just suggested to the guys, like, listen, we're going to make an album. I'm going to fly to each one of you guys and we're going to like track this album.
Oh my God.
But you got to promise me, like, I agreed to do the project on the condition that the drums would be tracked before I got there, because it's like the way that I thought about it was like, if you're willing to put the effort in to track the drums, then the rest of the project is going to happen. Like, I'm not going to fly back to Canada and then fly to each one of these cities all across Canada to record you guys unless the project is going to happen and we finish it. And so the initial and the drummer is a good engineer, sound engineer himself. So I knew that they'd be able to do it. So the drums were tracked in Toronto. The bass player was living in Whistler, BC, British Columbia, way on the other end of Canada. And he is the executive director of the Whistler Museum. So we decided to track all the bass in the museum, which was a lot of fun. And I got to stay with him over there in beautiful Whistler. Really want to go back. And then I flew.
Maybe got some skiing in also, right?
Well, it was not wintertime yet, but I went mountain biking and for the first time ever, and that was a lot of fun. And I had a pretty major spill, but it was great. And so the drums are tracked in Toronto. So I flew to Toronto, picked up the drums, crashed at the drummer's place, and then flew to BC, tracked all the bass in British Columbia, then got on a plane and flew to my home province of Newfoundland, way on the opposite end, 5 time zones away. And we tracked all the guitars in a fishing village called Pooch Cove in Newfoundland. And we tracked all the vocals in the vocalist's apartment in downtown St. John's above a Pakistani restaurant. And after we got everything tracked, I flew back to Bombay because I'm still, managing my mom's stuff over here. And I was mixing the album at my friend's studio, wonderful friend Jason D'Souza. And so I was mixing the Roundelay album at his studio, and he was hearing my work like in real time rather than like, here are some examples of stuff I made in Toronto back in the day. So he got to hear my work and see my process. And by the time I was wrapping up the Roundelay album, he suggested, hey, like, why don't you produce our band, the Cognac Net? And I was happy and honored and very much eager to contribute a project to this wonderful music scene that had embraced me despite my sort of weird North American accent. And so the Cognac Net was the 4th full-length album that I had the chance to produce. And, this line of work is such a weird line of work. I always just, every project that I've done, I've just assumed that it's going to be my last one. You never know how or when you're going to get your next project. So I was like, I was producing the Cognac Net album very much under the impression that it might be my last one. And I'm really thankful that I got to produce an album in India as well as Canada. And as I was wrapping up the Cognac Net album, I got another offer to produce an album for an artist called Short Round. And that led me to another project. And, here I am, just like officially producing lots of projects, like officially.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So that's a long, convoluted story. And I guess you'll have to do a lot of editing to get those random bits out when we were.
Well, oh, yeah, for sure.
But
leave it to me.
Yeah. So, I mean, basically one thing led to another. And now I officially have enough of a repertoire where I feel pretty secure about being a producer. It's no longer like a weird thing to say when somebody asks you what you do. And, I officially have like a good portfolio, a varied portfolio from luckily like around the world at this point, I can say.
Yeah. Well, I was listening to a couple tracks from each of those records before we jumped on the call. I really liked them. Sounded great.
Thank you.
Yeah, really, really great. And so I guess at this point it's just word of mouth, right? Like that's how you're finding new work.
Well, yeah. Now, I mean, if I'm actually like turning down projects. I think
wow.
I mean, I need a bit of a breather. Like I I am experiencing a bit of burnout. So I'm working. Actually, just released a single today with the artist whose full length album I'm working on currently. An artist by the name of Mali. So actually, today is what, November 5th. So there's a single out called Mundane, and it's by an artist by the name of Mali, Mali. Check it out. It just came out today. But I think I'm probably going to take a little bit of a break after I finish this album, just because burnout is a thing. I expected I'd be going. I expected I'd be going back to Canada long before this, but I just kept getting cool projects, so I kept sticking around. There's like lots of solo stuff that I have in the pipe that I need to finish up quickly and get out there. My mom keeps getting into troubles. I mean, the scam that she was involved in that initiated my move to India is nothing compared to the scam that I most recently bailed her out of. So,
Oh my gosh.
It's
what a crazy, wild story, man. Thank you for sharing your life's journey with this podcast with the listeners. I think people are gonna really find a lot of great takeaways from that. And
I hope it wasn't too boring. Like
dude, there's nothing boring about any of it.
Well, I guess you're right about that. But I sometimes I feel like I'm rambling. I have a podcast as well. I started my own podcast.
Oh yeah, plug it.
Well, yeah, Mispronunciation Nation. You can check it out wherever you get your podcasts, and you can find my podcast, and also links to the work that I've done at my website, flossdailyproductions.com. But just in terms of my story and me rambling, like because I've started my own podcast, when I'm editing them, I find that I ramble quite a bit. And I have resisted the urge to tell my own story on my podcast, because usually when I have a guest on, like as you know, it's more about the guest.
Yeah, for sure. You learn about the host in the long term, right?
Yeah,
it's like,
exactly.
If you listen to a lot of episodes, then the people who listen to this show for a lot of episodes basically know who I am after maybe 5 or 10 episodes.
Yeah. So let this be this podcast be the place where people can go if they want to find out about my backstory, I guess.
Nice. Love it. So how are you working there in Mumbai? Do you have like a studio set up? I mean, you describe yourself as a nomadic producer. Like, where are you doing things?
I have such a minimal setup. It's almost non-existent. When I lived in Toronto, I had a bunch of instruments, bunch of guitars, keyboards, and all that stuff is in a storage locker in Toronto, and it's been there for over 5 years at this point. And the whole time I've been over here, I never really knew when I was going to be going back. I mean, my long-term plan, which I'm going to attempt to initiate in the coming year, is that I want to spend 6 months here and 6 months there. 6 months in Bombay, 6 months in Toronto.
Nice.
But I've been saying that for like 3 years. And so since I've not known, like if I had known 3 years ago that I would have gotten all these projects, like I said earlier, you just always assume that the next one's going to be the last one. So if I had known that 3 years ago, I would have maybe bought myself a nice pair of monitors, maybe some instruments. Maybe I would have invested in an 88 key keyboard or something. I really miss being able to play like a 88 key keyboard. So because of the uncertainty, and because I've just been saying, hey, I'm going back to Canada in 2 months. Like I've been saying that for 2 years. It's like a joke. Like all of my friends just, and I literally had a ticket booked for March of last year, and then the pandemic happened. So it's actually comical. I'm dealing with almost no setup. Recently, I bought a really, really cheap set of monitors that I actually really love because of how shitty they are.
Which ones are these?
So they're Tascam, but I don't know what the model number is. They're the smallest things you can get and still call them monitors. But the reason that I love them is because if you've mixed a lot of electronic music, especially like sub-oriented music, and you have this experience where you're like mixing on like say KRKs or whatever it is that you're using, and then you hear that same track played in a club or on a huge club system, and then you hear the low end and it's just like too much. Like you really fucked up the low end, like if I think probably every electronic producer goes through this, where the first time they hear their low end on a big system, they're like, oh wow, like I need to sort this out. And unless you invest in like a large subwoofer, it's really hard to figure it out. You know, like you can get monitors with good low end response, and it still won't give you the sort of feedback that you need to mix your subs for these large systems. So the cool thing about these Tascams, these really tiny Tascams, is they actually have like a decent amount of low end for how small they are. But the trick really with these monitors is that if you mix your low end too loud, even the sub frequencies which you can't hear, the monitors just distort. Like they fuck up. Yeah. So
it's like the Oratones or something.
Yeah.
You know?
So like you can drop in a reference track and sort of turn up the reference track just to when it's about to distort, and then like back off like a little bit. And so then if you are mixing your low end, you know, if you've got like say a multi-band compressor on your low end, you can really like hone in on the sub frequencies and then the low mid range. And the moment that the monitors start to distort, then you know that you've mixed it in such a way where it's not going to fly on a large system. It'll just be too loud. And you know, I'm inclined to say we all have been to these hip hop shows where the low end is just so loud that you can't even hear any of the rest of the beat, any of the other intricacies of the beat. And then when you hear a track that's mixed properly, the low end hits, the sub hits, everything is there, but you can also hear, you know, the mids and the highs and everything quite nicely. And
I think that's like the classic NS10 trick, is like the NS10s start to break up if there's too much low end, and that's how people are able to mix low end with NS10s, I believe.
Yep.
Not that I don't have NS10s, but
I recommend everybody have a pair of shitty monitors like this in their setup that they can flip back and forth between. Like I think I'm gonna, like when I shift to Canada, I think I'm gonna look for a pair of monitors just like this. You know, because who knows what kind of room I'm going to end up in, whether I'm going to be even able to have like a subwoofer or even afford one. I can probably afford one at this point, but it's like, because all my gear is in a storage locker, I'm just like now averse to investing in like, you know.
I feel you. I feel you, man.
Yeah. So
sometimes you got to invest the dough, though. That's the problem.
That's a fact. Well, I agree with you, but I'm a huge proponent of just not waiting. Like with gear, I'm sort of like anti-gear is the wrong word, but you know how you can sometimes get into this space where like, oh, I can't do this until I get this piece of equipment,
right?
You know,
yes, of course.
You just forever hold back because it's like, well, it's not until I get this piece of outboard thing that I can produce properly, or not until I get, you know, and I'm maybe
it's just an excuse.
It's an excuse, and well, also, like, I've just learned so much from the opposite scenario. Like, and I'm in a situation where I've just been forced. Like, I'm going from a situation where I had some gear, wasn't amazing, and then life put me in a situation where I had to put that gear in a storage locker, and now I'm here with less gear than I've ever had in my life, you know? But
you're making the best music of your life.
Yeah, like my mixes are way better. I've learned so much more. Like the main thing I will say that's atrophied is my musicianship. Like, because I don't have a keyboard, because I don't have like my bass guitar, my like trumpet, these types of things. Like my actual musicianship has declined. Like I would say, like I sat in front of a piano the other day for the first time at my friend's place for the first time in like a long time. And it was actually kind of depressing. Like the dexterity is starting to go, whatever. But see, on the flip side,
you could build it all up, though. It's just about practicing, you know.
I think I could build it all up. But on the flip side, I've learned so much in the last 5 years just not having those instruments. Like because, well, first of all, before I moved to India, I was only on Pro Tools. Like I was making my beats by using like an outboard music workstation, like a Korg Triton. So that's like very much reminiscent of that Neptune sound. So I was using that and like my guitars and basses and trumpet, like live instruments, and Pro Tools to make beats. And if anybody makes beats, then they know that Pro Tools is the last software you want to use to make beats.
Right. Yeah.
And now, I'm glad that I know how to use Pro Tools really well because of that, and I still do all my mixing in Pro Tools. But after I moved to India,